With the trade deadline fast approaching, the Seattle Mariners offense needs some fixing, and gosh darn it, Joe and I are going to do our best. We're going to give you guys both our trade deadline plans. We're going to see which of ours you guys think is better, and we're going to have you guys vote down in the comments as to who had the better trade deadline plan. Now, let me preface this by saying we make some trades. We're no experts, okay? We don't necessarily have trade valuation correctly. That's why the people in the front office do what they do, and we do what we do. With that being said, we also are not 100% certain that the teams that we are trading to are actually going to be sellers, because if you've seen the MLB right now, teams are just right on the cusp of things. They're ready to either be sellers or be buyers at the deadline, and we don't really know where that's going to be because we're recording this here on the 3rd of July. I can speak for me anyway. My trades have gone through multiple, restructurings simply because of how teams have played recently. This is the one I'm settling on right now. This could change in a week. But with that being said, Joe, what is your first trade?
I've kind of prefaced this. I think there's an easy one. Maybe it's my frame of reference and my recency bias, but Jorge Polanco cannot be manning second base beyond July 30th. I'd hope sooner than that. And Ryan Bliss isn't fully the option either. I'm kind of in on the Nico Hoerner train. And sure, his bat's nothing crazy. He's definitely like a league average to below league average bat. Gives you plus defense. He doesn't strike out. It's a guy that you can plug in at number 2 after JP, or if you feel like, don't really like his bat value that much, you plug him in at the bottom of your lineup to keep it moving. All right. The Mariners are acquiring Nico Hoerner and a left-handed pitcher named Riley Martin, reliever in the Cubs organization in AAA Iowa. His ERA has dropped each year in their system. I feel like it's like a kind of maybe a sneaky like bullpen project arm for the Mariners.
Add to the pile.
Yeah, add to the pile, but it could be someone that thrives, right? In this, we're trading them Michael Morales, number 12 starting pitcher. He just made it to Arkansas. That's the highest prospect that the Cubs are getting in this. I don't think we can go. I mean, you can go a little bit higher, maybe closer into the top 10. Maybe the Cubs ask for that, but I think Michael Morales is relatively fair. Spencer Packard, a guy that feels like a 5th or 6th outfielder on this team, can also play a little bit of first base. He's in AAA Tacoma right now. I think he's kind of I don't know if he's a fan favorite. I feel like a lot of Mariners people in the community like him a decent amount. And then we're also trading them Luis Urias. He's not doing anything in Tacoma. He's not doing anything with Seattle. Ryan Bliss is basically, I'd say, taking over his spot. And that's the full trade. Nico Hoerner, Riley Martin, and then the Cubs are getting Michael Morales, Spencer Packard, and Luis Urias. And whether or not the Cubs say yes, I feel like the Mariners would probably say yes to that, though.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think the Mariners say yes because, like you said, if Michael Morales being the guy that you send out that's the highest on that list, sure, I'm in. And obviously they're taking on the rest of Horner's contract. And so if the Cubs are trying to get out from underneath that contract, it makes sense. It's not what they're going to do, Joe.
Because naturally, like you have the exact script for what they're going to do.
Yes, correct. You are correct in saying that Jorge Polanco will not be manning second base, but that's because Josh Rojas will be manning second base after the trade deadline. But that's because the Mariners are going to go get Isaac Paredes, Joe.
Interesting.
Isaac Paredes is going to come in with his $1.7 million to be added when the Mariners trade for him. The Mariners are going to trade Jonathan Clase for him, so whatever. As well as DeWall Joseph.
Okay.
A guy that can reset, I think, the infield for the Tampa Bay Rays. The infield for the Tampa Bay Rays in the future. I think DeWall Joseph is a guy who, in the next couple of years, similar to Felton and Celestine, similar to who else has come through? Lazaro, etc. from the international draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A guy that will kind of rocket up ranks, and I think that he's a guy that in a few years, because the Rays value control, and we have seen in the past few days, the Rays have been pretty good. And they are about, I think at the time of recording this, are 3 games back of a wild card. Are they willing to trade Isaac Paredes? I'm not sure. But with that being said, that's where I'm going. Jonathan Clase and DeWall Joseph for Isaac Paredes. The Mariners are taking on that entire contract. Is it enough for Paredes? Probably not. You probably have to go higher than Jonathan Clase, Mariners number 10 prospect. DeWall Joseph
is the 17, I think. 16 or 17.
Yeah, 16. So number 10 and number 16 from the Mariners farm system. You may need to go a little bit higher than Jonathan Clase. Maybe send a Michael Arroyo instead of DeWall Joseph. I'm not sure. Would I be willing to do that? I think so.
Yeah.
With that being said, Michael Arroyo goes somewhere else in my trade deadline. So that's where I'm going. Isaac Paredes at third base.
I think the Rays are in a weird spot because they just acquired like an athletic shortstop from the Brewers for Aaron Savali
Right.
today,
True.
right? So like that could be something that they're looking for just to like continue to kind of like retool that infield is like a twitchy athletic shortstop middle infielder that doesn't have to stick there. He can move around. I think Dwell Joseph's a good pick for that as well. Even like you're saying, like Arroyo could be a guy there too. A lot of comps to like a Josh Harrison, a utility guy that's a nice compact hitter. I don't see that being as a bad option for the Rays there. Colton, do you want to tell me where Arroyo's going, or do you want me to go next?
I want you to go next.
Okay, so I've acquired Nico Horner. I should probably tell you where Jorge Polanco's going.
Mm.
Okay, this is basically a nothing trade. I'm just gonna throw that out there. All right, we're plus 7 million in the bank as far as what the Mariners payroll has been added to with the Nico Horner trade on my part. We're trading Jorge Polanco, a change of scenery, to the Mets because they're in a weird spot with Jeff McNeil not being good. And maybe they'll just try out Jorge Polanco. Again, why would the Mets do this? Don't know. But maybe they've seen what like Minnesota did with the Jorge Polanco before. Maybe they're like, we can fix him. We're trading Jorge Polanco and RJ Schreck, outfielder in the Mariners organization. I think he hit his 11th bomb a couple days ago. He's either in Tacoma or he's not Tacoma. He's either in Arkansas or Everett. And we're getting Joey Lucchesi, left-handed pitcher, starting pitcher depth. Hasn't really done a whole lot since like kind of like bursting onto the scene, I think, with like the Padres a couple years back. But that then shaves off 5 million from your payroll. So you're only plus 2 million right now as far as the Mariners are concerned. Something that they're probably, I don't want to say like super worried about. Depoto's kind of said like, yeah, the money's not going to be a problem. I'll believe it when I see it. So right now I've only got them adding 2 million to their payroll with that trade.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cheap. In terms of adding a starting pitcher, however, Joe, it's going to be Jack Flaherty. He's going to be added to this team, the $7 million, and the Tigers are going to get Walter Ford and Taylor Dollard.
Okay.
It's not going to be a big trade for them, but it's a lottery, a couple lottery tickets, mainly on Walter Ford because he's still so far away. Flaherty is owed $7 million-ish the rest of the way. He is being held out of his next start at the time of recording this for back stiffness. So this may be something that by the time this video is released, they're like, Colton, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
He's on the IL. Doesn't make sense. But at the time of recording this, he's missing his next start with back stiffness. So who knows where that's at. With Jack Flaherty, I think it's a guy that you can slot in case Brian Wu just doesn't have it the rest of the way. If you wanted to go to a 6-man occasionally, you could. I don't think that's what the Mariners would want to do. And he's a guy that if and when you make it to the playoffs, you would probably rather have start than, say, Bryce Miller, just because of the pedigree that Jack Flaherty has. The Tigers may want a little bit more than Walter Ford and Taylor Dollard simply because of where the starting pitcher market's going to be come July 30th. There's no like huge big name guys. With that being said, we also just saw Aaron Savali get traded, a guy that I think could have made a lot of sense for the Mariners as well. Traded to the Brewers, like you said, for high A shortstop prospect.
Barrios? Yeah, I'd never heard of him until today. So.
Me neither. He was, I think, their number 20 or something like that, the Brewers. Somewhere. He was not in their top 10, I can tell you that much. So, interestingly enough, there wasn't a ton. It didn't cost them a ton to go out and get a starting pitcher. I think for the Mariners, trading a guy with some upside but has had a rocky start to his career in Walter Ford and Taylor Dollard, who just can't seem to stay healthy, maybe a change of scenery for both those guys makes sense, and the Tigers might like their upside.
So no Mark Canha, huh?
No Mark Canha.
Did you look at his numbers and realize that he hasn't been like as good as maybe you'd hoped?
I've never been a huge Mark Canha fan, personally.
Okay, you just kind of like, whenever we're talking, because we've talked about Flaherty a ton, right? And I figured Mark Canha might be a guy that you'd be interested in. I tried so many times to convince myself that the Tigers would be willing to trade Riley Green during this whole like drafting of trade deadlines. I want Riley Green to be a Mariner so bad. I think he'd fit so well out there in one of the corners. I just don't think the Tigers would do it.
No.
Not a chance. And I understand why. I've got a big trade next, Colton. A big trade. So big that it involves more than two teams. So it gets messy.
This is the one you said was kooky, huh?
This is kooky. I went with my kooky one. This was my second draft. I didn't know if I liked it, but I ended up liking it more than my final one. So I'm just going back to this one. You said that Joey Lucchesi is my starting pitcher ad. That is not correct. That's just a depth piece, right? That's just a depth piece along the way. Does
he have options?
He's in AAA.
Oh, is he? Oh,
I believe.
So he must have, yeah.
Unless he got DFA'd and cleared. So, could be wrong. This whole thing could be scuffed, but it doesn't matter because I'm acquiring a starting pitcher right now. And these two teams that are trading with the Mariners here are the Athletics and the Reds.
Okay, I have an idea of where you're going with this, I
So,
think.
what team would you like to hear what they receive first?
What they receive?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to hear what the Reds receive for Fernando Cruz.
Got it. So the Reds receive Gabe Spire, Jonathan
Mm.
Clase, Luis Carvello, and Shea Langoliers in this
Mm.
three-team trade. Shoring up catcher, I think a spot that is sorely short for the Reds, given when Tyler Stevenson is not available. Luke Miley should not be your catcher. I think if they get Langoliers, Bangoliers out there, could be good for them. The Mariners are giving up Gabe Spire, Jonathan Clase, and Luis Carvello in this trade. So it's not just Fernando Cruz, and the starting pitcher does come from the Reds. We're getting Frankie Montas.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, so an up and down year. Had definitely had his best years in Oakland. Familiar with him. We broke him a couple years ago in
Broken
Seattle.
this year.
Yeah, so I think if there's a pitcher that's not named Jack Flaherty that could be available, that's on a 1-year deal that you're paying similar money for, I think Frankie Montas is the guy. I didn't want to pick two. I think 2 out of the 4 that I've done, Flaherty's coming to the Mariners. All right. But the back stiffness has kind of pushed me away, and your willingness to do it pushed me away because I didn't want to have the exact same thing. So I wanted
Right.
to get a little kooky. Do the Reds do it? Probably not, but they're doing it. All right,
Mm-hmm.
because they've got
Okay.
Brandon Williamson,
Yeah.
Nick Lodolo, like Connor Phillips. They've got guys that can fill in that spot to maybe help retool and get better for the years coming, since they're probably not fully in it this year, given like their injuries and stuff like that. The Athletics receive Chase Petty, number 5 pitching prospect from the Reds. Ty Pete, Mariners number 7. Tyler Guff, Mariners number 30. Michael Papierski, a catcher to fill in for Bangaliers. And Levi Stout from the Mariners here. And that is just for Brent Rooker. So Chase Petty obviously is the front end of that for the Reds, helping get Langoliers and facilitate the Rooker trade. But in practice, it's Ty Pete, Tyler Guff, and Michael Papierski and Levi Stout for Brent Rooker.
Mm.
I think that the top end of it, number 7, they want maybe things to fill it out. You're getting 2 guys that could probably be on their roster tomorrow with Levi Stout and Papierski. And then Guff, who is the Mariners number 30, he's a couple years away, but like, who knows? He's a guy in the top 30 list. That's just kind of like where it stems from. And then Ty Pete, he could be like a freaky athletic guy. So yeah, final trade, the Mariners receive Brent Rooker, Fernando Cruz, and Frankie Montas.
Okay. I mean, it shores up a lot of things for the team that they need. I mean, you get some guys that some good right-handed power, which the Mariners kind of need right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Julio being as bad as he has been. Obviously, add to the back end of that bullpen with Fernando Cruz. And also keep in mind, guys, when we were making these, we're not accounting for the years after. We're accounting for this year. It's too hard to just go through and try to figure these out while also talking about, this guy has an option next year, this guy has a club option, what have you. So, yeah, just know that's where on my head was at when I was doing it. But I like it. I think that adding Frankie Montas makes sense. I don't know if he's a guy that you would rather have go than Bryce Miller in like a playoff game,
Sure.
but I think that he shores up the possibility of Brian Wu being injured.
Yeah,
And I think that is kind of the big part there.
when we were making these, like I made this one probably a couple days ago. Brian Wu's health was a bit more up in the air. Same thing with
Mhm.
Emerson Hancock. So like, do the Mariners necessarily need to go out and get a starting pitcher? Maybe not. Maybe they don't need to at this point. Maybe Lucchesi would be enough for people to be a little bit more comfortable. I mean, I don't think I trust him more than Jonathan Diaz personally, but it's a situation where it's a kind of old news. But that trade only adds $8 million to the payroll, so sitting at $10 million added at the deadline from me so far.
So far I've added about 8. We'll just round up to 9 million between Paredes and Flaherty. However, we're going to add a little bit more here because the Mariners are going to go make the trade with the Marlins, Joe, for Tanner Scott and for Brian De La Cruz, which is going to add about another, we'll just round it up to 4.5 million just to make things easy. About 13.5 million so far on the deadline. The Marlins are going to get Mariners prospect Johnny Farmello.
Okay.
Let me just pull up where these guys are at right now.
Number 6.
Number 6. They're also going to get Michael Arroyo, number 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to get Alberto Rodriguez,
22.
who is number 22, and Luis Suispel, who's number 27. The Marlins get 4 guys in the Mariners top 30 here, 2 guys in the Mariners top 10, and Farmello and Arroyo. I think that if you're the Marlins, you probably want to trade. You definitely want to trade Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott will be traded at this deadline because he's a free agent at the end of the year. He 100% will be. They're going to get something for him. When it comes to Brian De La Cruz, obviously they don't have to. He still has a few more years of control. With that being said, I think that he's a guy that we personally have seen how good he can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it should take anything more than 2 top 10 guys in this trade. But I threw in Rodriguez and Luis Bell maybe to sweeten the pot a little bit. Obviously, guys that Alberto Rodriguez might be here next year, maybe. I don't know. He just hasn't really performed. He came back to the organization and, was okay after a down year. I think it was last year was his bad year. Maybe it was the year prior. And then Luis Bell down there in single A, 21-year-old prospect. A couple guys that can dream on, but really the big prizes here are Farmelo and Arroyo.
I'm all about it. Get the super high leverage arm that the Mariners bullpen sometimes feels like it needs. Well, then I too have a trade with the Marlins. So we traded Gabe Spire and the Reds to the Reds. The Mariners need to go add another lefty, in my opinion, potentially. I did it with the Cubs, but he's not quite MLB ready. So the Mariners are also gonna go hang out in Miami, and they're gonna send Leo Rivas, okay, and Reed Van Scooter for Andrew Nardi. Like nothing really crazy going on there. It's a 1 top 30 and a guy that is on your 40 man for Andrew Nardi. And that's it. Nardi's got options, so you can play around with that if you need to. A guy that I was certain you were going to trade for. But that's where I'm at with this team. That doesn't really add a whole lot of money because Nardi's he's got 3 options. He's hardly pitched in the big leagues. Not hardly, but he's very new in terms of what money is to be owed to him.
Yeah, I think after everything was said and done, what did I say? I was at like 14, 15 million, something like that. That means it's time for me to go big, Joe. That means it's time to make the trade with the Chicago White Sox.
You're actually going to do it, huh?
The Mariners are going to go out and acquire Jared Schuster.
Oh, of course.
From the Chicago White Sox, a left-handed pitcher. He's been pitching out of their bullpen, but came up as a starting pitcher, I believe, from the Braves, right?
Yep.
And they're going to just send Dylan Wilson and Caden Polkovich. This is nothing more than just a depth move. This is a guy who you send down to AAA, get him back into his starting way. He's been good pitching out of the bullpen right now. He's a left-handed pitcher who currently his 34 innings pitched has a 3.15 ERA. I don't know. He's looked pretty good so far. A 1.34 whip, not great. But nonetheless, I think that he's a guy that makes a lot of sense to add to this team as a depth piece. With all that being said, this is also a way for the Mariners to transition Logan Evans back into a starter because he is so much more valuable to you as a starting pitcher, in my opinion, than he is as a reliever. So adding Jack Flaherty, adding Jared Schuster, those 2 guys, plus maybe what else I do, makes more sense to me than having Logan Evans come up as a reliever when you need the starting pitcher depth. Because right now, again, we talked about, and this trade was obviously made, again, like you said, when Brian Woo's health was a little bit more of a concern. But I think that adding another guy in the starting pitching depth that he's not great. He's not going to light the world on fire, but he's somebody that if you need him to can come make a start for you and it's not going to kill you. I think that Jared Schuster is a guy, and you don't have to give up really anything for him. A right-handed pitcher in Dylan Wilson, second baseman Caden Polkovich, who hasn't really done much.
Jared Schuster, welcome to Seattle.
Hell yeah!
You went big with the White Sox there.
I told you, that's how I wanted to do it. I wanted to like make it. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to make everyone think I was going for Luis Robert.
Yeah.
You tell me your next trade, please.
What next trade?
You're done? You're done.
I'm done. I mean, sure. Could I take my 3-team trade and split it into 2 to make it the same amount of trades? I could have, but
right. Okay.
I didn't.
Interesting. I'll be interested to hear what your lineup looks like after this.
Yeah.
But me, I am not done. And this time I'm actually going to go big, Joe. The Mariners are trading Cole Young.
Oh, you f***er.
Ty Pete, Tyler Locklear, Emerson Hancock, and Sebi Zavala. Okay.
Where?
4. Right-handed pitcher, CJ Vanek, or Ike. I'm not sure. Okay. Catcher Danny Jansen and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So,
Okay.
Adding Vlad, right? You're adding $10 million to your payroll. In the end, I think I add about 25, 26-ish million. Puts the Mariners at like 164, 65-ish, which is still below what they were in 2018, whatever it was. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is the kind of guy that you need to add to this team. Now, with that being said, yes, I know that they said that the Blue Jays said they wanted to have one more crack at this thing with Bichette and Vladdy next year, which is why I think you need to blow them away. In this trade, you are giving up a couple of guys in Cole Young and Ty Pete specifically that I feel like I'm not gonna say that this is like a blowaway deal. Like they feel like they have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're trading what? 1, 2, 3 guys in your top 30.
3 of which are in your top 10, one of which is
right.
a top 25 all MLB prospect in Cole Young.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so I personally am more of a fan of Colt Emerson than I am Cole Young. This let me keep Cole Young, let me keep Colt Emerson and Lazaro Montes, which is the most important. So obviously, you know that Vladdy's going to be your starting first baseman. He adds some to the middle of this lineup with Brian De La Cruz and Isaac Paredes. It's 3 guys you add to this lineup because yes, the Seattle Mariners offense is poo-poo, and these guys help a lot, like a lot. If nothing else, these are 3 guys that I think make this Mariners lineup so much more fearsome than it was before. You have Danny Jansen as your backup catcher now, so Mitch Garver does not have to be that guy anymore. He still can be, and obviously we've seen that, you know, he's been all right. But frankly, Danny Jansen's has been a better player this year.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you gotta. Yeah, I'm not saying cut bait on Garver. He's still your DH on my team. But with that being said, he has a much less impactful role because of adding Danny Jansen. I feel a lot more comfortable letting Cal get some days off with Danny Jansen behind the plate. And then CJ Van Eyck is a right-handed pitcher in the Blue Jays organization. He's 25 years old at Double-A, bit old for the level, but in 2024 he has a 3.67 ERA and with 11 games started and a 1.19 WHIP. This is another depth guy. Another guy you don't have to add immediately to your team, but a guy who might be MLB ready here sooner rather than later. And again, this is just more insurance for Bryant Wu. And so adding Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Danny Jansen, Isaac Paredes, and Brian De La Cruz offensively to your team, I think your team is so much better now than it was going into this deadline.
I'd hope so. I mean, you're adding 2 guys with like a 140 and above WRC plus. Brian De La Cruz is above average. Paredes is good. Like, yeah, I mean, I will say I definitely am playing on the safer side. You are more so like the chips all in position, and I think that is something that definitely, like, you're looking at like, yeah, the team needs it more than ever right now because the team's offense has been horrendous. Adding those guys, it's night and day what it looks like. I'm curious to hear your lineup because and like what your bench and like how that all turns out because
there are names that
there are names that
were
won't
not
be there.
traded,
Mm-hmm.
right? That were not traded, but what do you do with them then? I agree. So my lineup is as follows, and this could I think that the lineup was made a couple weeks ago,
Okay.
so I'd probably change it now.
Sure.
But as of when I made this lineup, J.P. Crawford was still leading off. Julio Rodriguez was still batting 2. Then you had Isaac Paredes batting 3, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. batting 4, playing first base. Brian De La Cruz, right field, batting 5th. Cal Raleigh batting 6th at catcher. Luke Raley in left field. Mitch Garver as the DH, and then Josh Rojas as your second baseman. So, noticeable names that are not in there are obviously Jorge Polanco and Mitch Haniger. Mitch Haniger's gone. The Mariners DFA him.
Wow.
He's out. Done. Get him out.
Wow.
I love Mitch Haniger. I do. He's worthless to this team right now. He's gone. Jorge Polanco is still hanging on by a thread. I would honestly rather get rid of Polanco than I would Mitch Haniger.
Sure.
But you just need the positional versatility more so with Polanco, in my opinion. And so Polanco is on this team hanging by a thread. If they were to DFA him as well or trade him for some high A lottery ticket from somewhere, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But as of right now, he is still on this team on the bench. Dylan Moore is on the bench. Danny Jansen is on your bench as your backup catcher, and Ty France is your backup first baseman on the bench as well. A guy who you're probably okay with maybe having him go play first base and Vladdy DHing sometimes, if not more often than not, because of how bad Mitch Garver has been.
Okay. So Bliss and Canzone optioned,
Optioned.
Haniger gone, and then Savala was traded.
Yep.
Whoa.
Lineup needs turnover, baby.
Yeah. Definitely definitely a bit different than what I've done here. Mine will definitely look like the wimpy versus the hefty that you just pulled off, but JP leading off, Nico playing second. I've got Rooker batting third, DHing. I've got Cal batting 4, catching. Rayleigh batting 5, playing left. And then Julio batting 6th, playing center. It's weird with how Julio's struggling, but that's kind of I readjust the lineup this morning. Julio batting 6th, playing center, obviously. Ty 7, Canzone and right. Rojas 9 at third base. Rojas probably can move up in there somewhere, some way, somehow, depending on what it looks like. I have on my bench. I did not cut or trade Mitch Haniger. I don't think the front office has the balls to do it.
I don't think they do either.
And I didn't have the balls to do it either. I feel like you can't, like you just can't. Maybe it's an off-season thing, but I feel like Haniger, he's a bench bat, and that's all he's going to be. I don't think he should see innings in the outfield over Moore or Canzone at this point. Garver's on the bench, DHing, or even Rooker as well. Rooker could go and go out there and play the corner outfield spot instead of one of the lefties. Got Garver on the bench as your DH when against the lefty, basically, or your backup catcher. And then in parentheses, I have Savala, given injury questions. Then I still have Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore. I do not have the bench turning over a ton, given my, I guess, apprehensiveness to go out there and add more than $10 million to the payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that's at. My pitching staff, it's still Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, Miller, and then Montas with like an asterisk on Wu.
Mm-hmm.
My what's it called? I almost called it a rotation. My bullpen. The bullpen. Munoz, Stanek, Santos, Cruz, Thornton, Sauce, Voth, Andrew Nardi.
Okay,
He's got an option. Mike Bauman's available. Colin Snyder, Riley Martin.
Option Nardi.
No, but I'm just saying there's the ability to. He has the ability to, right?
Got it.
Like if you need an arm, you can option him because he's got 3 left. That's the main reason of like why I was pretty interested in acquiring him, is the fact that he has options versus some of the other guys that maybe don't. It gives you some versatility too. And of course that's also encompassing on like guys that you can option, like Snyder. Like there's a weird spot for the 8th man in that bullpen unless someone's injured, But that's my team post deadline 2024, Colton. Let me hear your rotation and your bullpen.
Yeah, so my rotation is the same, except instead of Brian Wu with Jack Flaherty, and like they're just kind of alternate. It just depends. It really just depends on where they're at and health wise and whatnot. My bullpen is Andres Munoz, Gregory Santos, Tanner Scott, Ryan Stanek, Taylor Saucedo, Trent Thornton, Austin Voth, and Gabe Spire. Added about $26-ish million to this pay. Did I say 9 people in my bullpen? No, I said 8.
You said 8.
Added $26 million to this payroll. Obviously, most of that is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think in terms of comparing both of our teams here, put down in the comments whose team you think is better. But
what? Colton.
Put down in the comments which you think is more likely to happen.
No. You want it to be who's better, and it's obviously yours, which is fine.
I think in both of our deals here, the Mariners got better.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yours is more realistic. Mine's going a little bit bigger. The trades are a little bit harder to come up with simply because of how much teams are going to want in return for guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But overall, I think that this is our deadlines are pretty dissimilar, which I'm actually happy about. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we didn't go the same route on a lot of them. But let us know in the comments down below what you guys think of each of our deadlines. We appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.